Hey guys, how you guys doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch this video that I made for you. Now, in today's video, we are going to take a look at what makes Linux so hard when you switch over from Windows or Mac OS for that matter. Some people say that it isn't for Mac OS, some people say that it is. Either way, we're going to take a look at that today. Now, before we do that though, I'd like to ask you to take a minute and hit that thumbs up button, the subscribe button, and that notification button so that way you get notified of every new video that we make today or tomorrow or the week after or whenever. So you know exactly when new goodness is coming out. Either way, you guys hit those buttons. All right. All right. So you made the decision to switch to Windows or to Linux from Windows or Mac, and you're finding that Linux is hard. A lot of people are saying that it's hard. And I, for the life of me, can understand why. Because one thing that makes Linux hard is understanding its philosophy of a few things. There's quite a few things that actually make Linux hard when you're switching over from Windows. What is Linux? It's an operating system that is not as popular as Windows or Mac, but it's drastically better in the fact that you have tons of freedom. Now, the freedom that I'm talking about isn't the freedom of it being free, but it's freedom over your software and your hardware and exactly how your hardware or your software uses and accesses your hardware. Now, that's on a technical level, but you can control what hardware and the software do together as you gain more knowledge in Linux. And it'll also, you can even control how long it uses it for. Also, you have control over privacy things too. Like you can choose what info is divulged publicly. Yeah, I mean it's very privacy centric as compared to the telemetry and all the other garbage that Windows has been putting in. Another thing that makes Linux so hard for new to Linux users is the learning curve. It can take new users a little longer to learn their way around a desktop. I mean, come on. I mean, the desktop environment is, even though it is mostly explanatory, it's still something you're not used to. It's something new. So you have a little bit of fear, a little nuance there of stuff that is not in places. You know, if you're a push the button type person to turn on your computer, and that's about the most that you know about your computer, it's gonna take you a little longer to familiarize yourself, with it. You know what I'm saying? But if you like to code or you're a tinkerer, and like mess with settings and stuff, well, in just a few hours you're gonna be up and running. Like I've said, before, if you're that kind of guy, you're never going to miss a beat on Linux. Linux makes it harder for people to navigate because it's actually simple. That's the one thing that makes it the hardest, is because it's actually laid out so simply. 9 times out of 10, your desktop environment is so simple that unlike Windows or Mac, it's not a constant barrage of menu after menu after menu, meaning that most of your stuff that you want to use is not buried in a menu that you click here that takes you into here to another menu. You click on this other menu, and next thing you know, you're in another menu. You're like 3 menus deep before you even get to the piece of software or the setting that you want to get to. In Linux, it's more categorized. It's right from the get go, right from the jump. You hit the application launcher, and right in there is usually where you're at. Now, it can be a little tricky in a window manager, but we're not even going to talk about window managers because that is another type of desktop out there. But that is more for savvier, veteran Linux users. Maybe in a couple years down the road, you'll be able to use that and be fine. It's just as simple as clicking on a category in a regular desktop environment, and there's what you're looking for. Yet that simplicity is what makes Linux difficult, sincerely hard for some new users. Another thing that makes Linux difficult for new to Linux users, can't lie, is terminal. This isn't anything for a power user from Windows to learn how to use. If they've been using that, well, then they're going to know exactly what they're doing. But for the average user, well, that's another story. It can even be scary, especially if you don't know the terminal commands. But don't worry, because I'm gonna drop a little wisdom on you, man. No one truly knows all of the different Linux commands. If they do, I'll put a paycheck on saying they're lying. I'm sure there's one that if they did know, they forgot. But either way, the point is you can't possibly know. I mean, there's so many commands for Linux that you can do and get things done in it, and it's not always the same. There's like multiple commands that can do the same thing. Also, there's derivatives and variations. So, and I'm going to turn you into a little secret. Even I don't know all of them. I still have to look up a lot of them. And I'm a 26-year plus veteran of Linux. So when it comes to being terminal stupid, I'm right there with you guys. I'm right there with you, man. You ain't got to worry about it, man. I'm just as terminal stupid as some people, man. So let's be stupid together, all right? Let's be terminal stupid together. Software installation is another thing that is making Linux hard. And it's not that it can't be done, but it's knowing how to install software. Sometimes it's hard. Also, what software can you use? It's like your favorite Windows software. There's a lot of alternatives out there, but Windows programs don't always work on Linux, not without a compatibility layer known as Wine that can be buggy at best sometimes with certain Windows applications. So this is nothing new. This has been talked about ad nauseum throughout the years. You know, another part of installing software that can be hard for new to Linux users too is simply knowing where to go to install it. In the terminal, there are commands you could use that can install software that most people don't really know about. But there's also graphical user interfaces like software centers, and that's the thing. What are they called? You know, like you have Discover and KDE. Discover, if you're new to Linux, you've never seen that before, and you just installed a fresh KDE, you're never going to think Discover is an application. The only thing that makes it do that is it's kind of got the same symbol as the Microsoft App Store, okay, in the sense of the shape, but not the color. It's all blue, you know. And in GNOME, it's add or remove software. It opens up the software center. You know, I mean, everything. It's never nothing is uniformly named in Linux, so you know. It's hard. It makes it hard because it's confusing to the new to Linux users. There are alternative software, you know, when you're talking about, you know, using a, you know, XYZ app that you used to use in Windows, there are alternatives that you could use out there, but here's a problem. Oftentimes they look and feel different, so most people just don't bother. They're like, oh, this isn't, you know, they say this is supposed to be like GIMP, but it's really not like GIMP. I don't get it. You know, this is no good, you know. They say I can't use this XYZ app, so Linux sucks, so they leave. But honestly, they never give the alternatives a chance. They never even try. All they do is just say it sucks, it's horrible, I'm out. You know, most alternatives are very similar and get the job done, but the learning curve gets people. Plain and simple. You know, just being real here. I mean, people don't want to take the time to learn something new. And that oftentimes sets them back. Because I tell you what most people don't realize about some of those alternatives is that they're not always designed like your most proprietary software are. Now, you can oftentimes find some proprietary software, cross-platform programs that you use in Windows, Mac, and Linux, or Windows and Linux, or Windows and Mac, or Linux and Mac. But those are the ones that you get lucky with that you can use, and it's like you never left home, right? But the ones that are alternatives sometimes take a lot of learning. Well, not a lot, some not so much. But just getting your head wrapped around that this isn't Linux. I mean, that this isn't Windows. This is Linux. So once you start doing that and you start giving those alternative apps a chance, you might find that some of them actually improve your workflow and make you a better person using those apps. So don't be sure or don't sell out on those alternative types of apps, because I'm telling you, there's a lot that can be done. Another thing that makes Windows difficult for new to Linux users is the fact that it's one of the hallmarks of Linux is that you can customize the shit out of it. You can make it look and feel just how you want it, but that is a double-edged sword, and it makes Linux hard to new to Linux users. Oftentimes, there isn't very clear documentation. You wind up borking a configuration file or setting some setting in there that you don't remember how you got to, and somehow you set it, and that becomes a horrid nightmare to look at and use. So, therefore, you don't even know how to do that. But what makes it even worse is also another part that makes it bad is documentation in itself. As I mentioned before, man, it's spotty at best because some documentation is great. I mean, it documents X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, do this, do this, do this. And other things are like, if it doesn't work, try this. And that's it. There's no follow up. There's no troubleshooting steps. There's no nothing, and some of it is written literally in a foreign freaking language and you can't even translate it. That's happened to me before. And that sucks royally because you could tell as much documentation was there. There was actually a quality documentation document, and there's no uniformity in the Linux community about that. The Linux community is fragmented with documentation. Sometimes it's great, like the Arch Wiki is fantastic. Gentoo Handbook is great. Those are, you don't want to do those as new to Linux users. You don't want to use those, but I'm just telling you, they're so complex that they actually are greatly documented. But some of your basic beginner ones, no documentation or very piss poor. Sorry, that's the reality of it. Got to be real here, and I wish developers or contributors that help maintain these things did a better job at that. But ironically, a lot of development for Linux isn't done in English-speaking countries, and that could be a drawback to them. They're doing it to the best of their ability. It's just falling short. That's all it is. So it's not a hate thing. It's just a factual thing. So that leads me to another thing that is making Linux hard for new to Linux users that are switching from Windows. And that's resources. Yeah. Most distributions and developers try to have their system resources and information known in their like GitHubs, GitLabs, or their web page for their doc section or whatever. Sometimes they'll link their GitHub in there. But oftentimes, new to Linux users are forced to trust the Google God. And when I say Google God, I mean Google God in a very sarcastic way. Well, if you just try, if you just Google how to set monitor resolutions in Linux, you're going to get a metric fuck ton of information that pops up. How do you know what's right for you and how to really do it? You're new to Linux. You've never done it before. How do you freaking know? The best advice is go to the distros forum or their Discord and get help there. Or go to a Discord like mine, or the Linux Cast has one that has a help section. Zany has one that has a help section, although he's gearing more so towards Nix, but he's still giving out. He's a great person. He'll help you on anything. You know what I'm saying? Try those places, and post your questions. But keep in mind that when you go asking questions in these places, ask well-formed, well-informed, meaning give all the specifications of what your problem is, and respond with good intent to questions that are asked, because a lot of times to a seasoned veteran, you're probably going to omit, especially if you're new to Linux, a key important thing like system specs, what type of operating system, what type of application you're having an issue with, that kind of stuff. You're just oftentimes people type in, I have a problem with this, and that's it. There's many things like, how did you try to set this setting? Do you know where the setting is? That kind of stuff. So be willing to engage in a constructive conversation, and understand that you're going to get asked some questions from many people, because everybody's going to try to help, especially in the Discords. They're going to try to help. So that being said, also be very careful about, if you do a Google search, you're going to get a bunch of terminal commands oftentimes on something like this. And if you're going to do that, you better be careful as to what you're just blindly copying and pasting in, because the fact of the matter is, if you don't know Linux very well, you don't understand some of these commands, you don't know what you can do. I mean, you could wind up following a wrong thing and make your monitor's resolution look like you've been on a week-long binger and can't see the monitors correctly, even if you uncross your eyes. I mean, it could be bad. It could be very bad. I've had that happen to me before, man. It's like you're in some type of convoluted hell, and you wind up having to uninstall and then reinstall Linux just to get back to just a standard basic resolution. So, in conclusion, I don't want to discourage you from giving Linux an honest to goodness try. I want you to push through. When you start working with Linux and you run into like these alternative applications and software because you can't get an application or software to work from Windows that you're used to, give it an honest chance. Okay, do some research, do some work. Go to the actual website or the forum or the Discord for those applications, because even those have Discords and forums as well, and start asking some questions. I'm just switching over from Windows. What can I expect here? What can I do to get it to do what I want to with what I used to do with Windows? I understand it's going to look and feel a little different, but hey, how can I set it up so that my workflow is at least similar to those kind of things? Give it an actual honest to goodness chance, because a lot of people fail to do that and they wind up missing out on all the greatness that actually is Linux. Because believe it or not, what makes Linux so great is your ability to learn. Learning is a key component in Linux that you will never stop doing, and that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. You will expand your knowledge. You'll expand your understanding. Also, you never know what you're missing out on. I tell you what, when I came to Linux, it was a little bit of a learning curve from Windows, but I got it. Okay, and it was a lot harder back then than it is now. Now it's pretty much so many different distributions out there, and that is another thing. There are so many distributions, it can be confusing as to which one you try. So that could be a problem. Now, what you can do is try and push through. Try pushing through this. Most of them are just right out of the box customized, and they look a lot and feel a lot like what you're used to already in Windows, with an app launcher, a system tray, and a window manager that lays out windows for you, just like you do in Windows. So you're not going to have that negative of an experience. It's just a matter of getting outside of the box and understanding that it's a look and feel that's a little bit different than Windows, and you might have to actually simplify yourself in the way you think to actually get to things, because it's not as convoluted as Windows, honest to God. Now, gaming is a source on it as well. Gaming is probably about 80% there, but that's okay, because at 80% used to be 10% 3 years ago. So 70% growth in 3 years is phenomenal, and that expansion is a lot credited to Valve. Now, they're still working. They're still going. So it won't be long before we're going to see 90 to 95% compatibility there. The biggest thing that ruins it is the easy anti-cheat. Honest to God. Once they have developers that help start, writing stuff for Linux, and the market share is now at 4% and it's growing, but then the way we get those numbers can be questioned. But either way, that's still playing, and that's making a big factor that some developers are going to take Linux a little bit more serious. So one day it will be. So I hope this video helped clear up some stuff and make it easier for you. Don't give up. Push through. The apps are the biggest difficulty. As you're used to doing things in one way, in one OS to the other, and you're leaving. So now what? You know what I mean? So it's totally different. Well, I promise learning the alternative software will help out a lot. You might even find that it makes you more efficient and you have a better workflow, like I said. Till then, I'll simply say to you, y'all keep doing what you do. Keep on Linuxing. Stay blessed, and above all, I'll see you in the very next one.